Redditors, what's the most satisfying act of I don't give a fuck that you have ever witnessed? I was in line at a coffee shop and the lady was complaining that they didn't have organic milk, and without a word or hesitation the guy behind the counter just said next please, not even taking her order. When I worked at a cafe, a woman requested gluten-free bread. I said, we don't have gluten-free bread. Her, what if I want gluten-free bread? My co-worker, I'll go somewhere else, I guess. I forget if she stayed, she was with someone else, or left. We had things that were gluten-free like omelets and salads, but no bread. Back when I worked at a movie theater, one of my fellow assistant managers, Jack, had the constant attitude of not giving a fuck. He'd worked at the theater longer than anyone and was good friends with the general manager, so he got away with murder. One time this lady wanted a refund for a movie she'd finished watching. She was going crazy, screaming at us about how the movie was so inappropriate to be rated PG-13 and she couldn't stand all the swearing in the movie. I kept calmly trying to explain to her that since the movie was already over we couldn't give her a refund. Our policy clearly stated no refunds after 30 minutes into showtime. She's not hearing it, and looks to Jack now, like he will give her the answer she wants. He starts saying the same thing I did, and she interrupts him again with her yelling about how she couldn't stand all the swearing in the film. Jack rolls his eyes and just says, well, that's just too fucking bad, and walks off. Cue stunned look on my face and the ladies. Some Karen was beefing about a 25 cents off coupon. The coupon was for a 42-ounce bottle of something, but she wanted a 28-ounce bottle. The coupon was rejected when scanned, because, there was no product to match it. There was nothing the cashier could do, but Karen just kept demanding 25 cents off. Finally, the guy ahead of me in line marched up to the counter, slapped a quarter down, and said, there's your fucking 25 cents off, now pay your fucking bill so the rest of us can go on with our days. I did the same thing once. I was waiting to get my car back from a brake job and this dude was complaining about how the price for an oil change was $25 and he was only going to pay $25 even though the sign also said plus taxes and fees or something. The total bill comes out to like $32 or something. No big deal really, everyone knows about tax and about disposal fees at places like this. A point to know is that this dude was one of the 3 people in the town who together owned about 90% of the rental properties. This is a college town and they make the prices incredibly expensive because they know they can, since everyone is paying for it with loans. This is to say the dude had a ton of money, it's not like the extra $7 was breaking the bank for him. So, the dude wasn't having it and kept arguing with the guy for 5 to 10 minutes. My car was done and I wanted to leave since I was sitting there for about 2 hours waiting, so I ended up walking up to the counter and saying something to the tune of stop bitching at the worker. I'll pay your fucking bill, just leave, I want to go. He tried to say that he doesn't need my help, in which I responded then pay the fucking $30 and fuck off. He tried to make a point where the sign says $25 so it should be $25. I gave the worker there my card and told him to run that, and again told the dude to just go and that none of us want to hear him bitch like a little girl anymore. He ended up getting mad at this college kid talking down to him and stormed out without paying. The worker didn't run my card for his job. What was nice was that the guy working at the counter owned the Monroe I was at, didn't know at the time, and made me only pay for parts on the work I got done and not labor, since I said was he always wanted to say to that dude. Apparently the guy has been a problem in the past, so I thought the gesture was really nice of him, and I was a decently broke college kid, so saving the cost on labor was a lot to me. Every time I tell this story I feel like a poster on r/that happened or something, but I promise it's 100% true. I typically keep to myself in those situations, but I really wanted to go and I could see the tired expression on the owner's face as he was done with that dude's shit, so I felt like I had to say something. Was living and working from home on a super busy street. One day I hear a ruckus out front. There's an SUV stopped in the middle of the road, the occupants apparently having a fight. No traffic could get by, and wouldn't you know it, like 10 cars back there's a deputy's car. Deputy walks up, already pissed off by the shape of his stride. Now I couldn't hear anything up to this point, but things got very loud. He demanded to know what the issue was. Driver wanted the passenger out of the car. Deputy asks the passenger, whose car? Passenger begrudgingly says it's the driver's, but that they help pay for it. Deputy, out of the car. Passenger, but. Deputy, now. Out. Passenger gets out. Goes to stand on the curb as directed. Deputy, to the driver, drive. Passenger, but how am I supposed to get home? Deputy, walk. Turns, walks off into sunset. Seriously, that last walk was the coldest damn command I'd ever heard. The deputy was 100,000% done with everyone's shit that day. In college we had this prof for physics who liked to pick on a few students, basically me and a few others. We had an exam, and he would take off major points over trivial items. Cases where people were getting the correct answers but he didn't agree with our work, shit like that. And we're talking getting 2/20ths on a question, which pretty much fucks you over. After insulting us, the prof gets up and solves a problem on the board, and made a trivial mistake, the kind of one that nearly caused us all to fail his class. One of the guys gets up, writes F on the board, flicks him off and walks off. Truly the hero we need. Had a legendary Ang prof that was getting wind of people sharing information and basically considered it cheating. Went as far as to set a trap. Extremely difficult question and posted the answer on check.com, which is a study help website where everyone pretty much got their answers/studies. Caught a lot of people, like most of the classes he was teaching. Which was 3 I think. I wasn't in the class but got it all second hand. NXT day, walks up to the whiteboard and draws a pyramid with blank spaces. Tells the class to fill in the spaces of who told the other people and walks out. Had an inland flight about 3 years ago. This kid in the row behind me, prob 6 to 8 years old, started to kick my seat after takeoff. It was not a long flight, about 1.5 hour. But I hate this kinda shit. So I turned around and sure enough, that prick was kicking my seat, while his mom and dad was sitting on either side of him, pretending to not notice. First I kindly asked the dad if he could make him stop, and he somewhat tried to convince his kid to stop. The kid sulked, but seemed to get the memo, at least for 1 minute, and then proceeded to kick my seat again. And once again I turned around, and this time, dropped the police entries, and told them that this was a golden opportunity to teach their kid some manners. As this is Norway, and some people are starting to feel more entitled than others, this didn't go that well, and mom started to yell at me, and that he is just a kid, and needs to express himself. It is at this moment the flight attendant arrives, and I try to explain the situation, while this kid's shitty mom and dad tries to bagatelize my complaint, by saying I'm the one who is making a scene. The flight attendant, not wanting any trouble as we are miles above ground, tries to explain that kicking the seat can be annoying and that we all should just get along. Flight attendant leaves, and kicking commences, so I simply picked up my stuff, walked to the row behind them, asked the woman behind them, if she would be so nice to could move to the window seat, so I could get the middle seat. She just smiled and nodded. I sat down behind the kid, and started kicking for the 40-50 minutes that was left of the flight. TLDR kid was kicking the back of my seat, parents didn't want to do anything about it, traded to a seat behind them, and started kicking the kid's seat. Edit. Apparently bagatelize is not an English word, and what I meant was trivialize. Sorry. Edit 2. Wow, thank a lot for the awards. I'm new to Reddit so I'm not sure what it does, but I'm happy either way. Also I would thank you all for the support. Reddit truly is a great community. Edit 3. Apparently I have to address this. Since it's an airplane, the seats are locked together, thus the parents felt my kicks just as good as the kid in the middle. I didn't kick so hard that anyone would go flying, just enough to be f***ing annoying. I got stuck in front of a seat kicker years ago. Not quite the same reaction from the mother or flight attendant, but just as useless. When we landed, I went to get my stuff from under the seat and I find a kid's shoe there. I stuck it in my bag. As I'm getting off the flight, they're still looking for the kid's shoe, which was going to be pretty hard to find since I tossed it in a trash can. I might be going to hell for stealing some kid's shoe in a petty fit of revenge, but it felt good at the time. I fly a ton and I approve of this. I had a guy move my carry-on bag for some reason without asking. Guess his would fit better there? No idea. I was in a window seat with the two others in my row already seated, so I couldn't do anything other than say, "Hey, why are you moving my bag?" He was on his cell phone and just says, "Oh, it's just some crazy person yelling at me." So that made me livid and I had a couple hours to stew over it. As luck would have it, he moved my bag right above where he was sitting a couple rows back. So I made my way back as quickly as I could after we landed. It was a full-sized carry-on, so when I took it down I accidentally dropped it onto his shoulder. Didn't cause any permanent damage, but I feel like he deserved it. Yes, we're both the assholes here, but oh well. My location for work has 1K people being laid off in 5 weeks. We basically started doing the bare minimum. We've been playing Cards Against Humanity, and streaming TV shows. We do about 2 hours of work, then spend the next 7 fucking around. Speaking of, I got to go, I'm hosting the next game. Edit, thank you all for the upvotes. Now my highest rated comment is about not doing job, and playing Cards Against Humanity. I did this, but found out before they told us. If you are a large employer and need to lay off a large number of people, you have to notify the government through the WARN Act. The list is published regularly and I found out they were closing our office because we were the only one with enough employees in the city. For almost 6 weeks I fucked off. About the second week the manager brought me into his office and wanted me to fire me, but I told him that he was getting closed down and I wouldn't tell anyone if he let me finish out my time. For the record, the bank told everyone that they were being laid off 2 days before their last day. Fuck you, Wells Fargo. It was me doing it. I worked at a 24-hour restaurant. My shifts mostly were Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. The manager of the restaurant really believed I wanted his job, so he would write me up for the most ridiculous things. One time he wrote me up for a bad review from a customer, on a night that I wasn't even working. That one got him in trouble with the regional manager. Moving forward, it was a stupidly busy Saturday night, about 5:45 p.m. I got into work and he met me with yet another write-up. This time for allowing the kitchen to run out of a particular item during my last shift. I didn't even do the orders, but apparently it was my fault. So, I went back to my car, took off my uniform, put on normal clothes I had in there, walked up to the kitchen counter where he was busy with the kitchen staff and some waitresses and waiters. He looked at me, told me what area I would be working that night. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I don't think so." He said it again, and again I said, "I don't think so." This time handing him all of my uniforms. As I turned to walk out of the restaurant, he called out after me, "You can't do this. You are rostered on." I turned, pulled my height and said, "Oh honey, I can," and I just did. As I have been rostered for only 37 hours in total each week for the past 6 weeks, it is deemed I am part-time. As a part-time employee, I am only required to submit my resignation. I am not required to give you any notice. He called me about an hour later and begged me to go back. Yeah, fuck you mate, that's not happening. One of my high school teachers was just before retirement. I remember on the day of the final exam he handed out the test papers, then sat down at his desk and read the newspaper. With it opened up all the way in front of him. He couldn't see us and vice versa. The smart girl in front finished first and just passed her paper back. It went all around the class. Not the first fuck was given by him on that day. In my history course in college, professor would give us like 10 questions a week before exam, then on the exam he'd have 3 of those questions we had to answer in a short essay response. Everyone would just pick the 3 easiest questions from the 10, write it up and save it to their phones, then when we had to do the exam just pull out our phones and copy it. We wouldn't even respond to the specific questions on the exam. Oh, and 10% of our grade was by attendance. He'd pass out a piece of paper and everyone write their name on it. I'd see 40 names on it, half with the same handwriting and pen, but only 15 kids in the class. That prof didn't give a fuck. Edit, he had a super thick Persian accent and very difficult to understand, for those wondering if you went to the same college I did. I have to admit that I got pretty close to doing things like that before I retired last year. Especially with the required freshman classes. Most of the students were only there to fulfill the administrative requirement, not to learn anything, really. That was fine with me because it gave me more time to spend on the minority of students who actually did want to learn. Win-win. In high school, I was a senior and he was a sophomore, and we had gym together. He would make nasty, sexual comments about me constantly. Just gross. I reported it to the gym teacher who laughed it off. The last straw was as we were getting off the bus after a field trip and he grabbed my ass. I got off the bus, handed my stuff to a friend and the minute his feet touched the ground, I went at him. All 110 pounds of me just wailing on him. He couldn't get a punch in even though my friends said he tried LOL. I blacked his eye, bloodied his nose, pulled out a chunk of hair and scratched him up pretty bad. I quit when he dropped into the fetal position, then I just walked home. It was fucking great. Monday I got called into the office because this went down on school property. I got the gym teacher in trouble for inaction and was suspended from the bus for a month. Dude got a 3-day suspension for ass grabbing. When he came back, his face was still pretty colorful and he got teased relentlessly for getting his ass kicked by a girl half his size. He grew up to be a meth head, in and out of jail. ETA, this was in '91, so the no tolerance policies weren't in effect yet. It's still the same. I got in trouble for punching a guy who cornered me against a wall at school, forcing me to kiss him. Apparently he couldn't have done that because he was from a nice family. He was older than me too. Schools don't give a fuck and are full of sexist staff. When I delivered pizza we had this older driver, prob in his 20s, who came back from a delivery and was pretty annoyed. A few minutes later the store got a phone call complaining about him. Essentially what happened was, a regular pie delivered was $11.97 and the person handed him $12 and asked for their change. He said okay, went back to his car and got 3 pennies and looked the woman in the eyes and rolled the pennies between her legs into her house and walked back to his car. Years ago, I delivered to a notorious stiffer. It was like $13.99 and the dude gives 14 and legit says keep the change okay. I had a penny in my apron and tossed it over my shoulder as I'm walking away. Kid was like, I think you dropped something. I said no, it's okay, I don't need it. Damn, thought this was about me for a second. I worked at Pizza Hut and had a customer do this to me. I told them I don't carry loose change and drove back to the store. I got back and the manager is livid, yelling at me to go back and give them a full refund. I told her fuck that and that I rely on tips since they paid me shit. She insisted that I had to. I took up my shirt, threw it at her and said you go fucking do it and walked out the door. I was the only driver that night, and it was so satisfying. Work in Geek Squad, another agent was really upset that day and had a rough patch of a few clients who were really mean and extremely rude to him. After bearing through them and after about a 10-minute break he helped another client. Their first words were, all right, Best Buy gave me a shit product that broke after 6 months and I want you to fix it right now, which he explained that there's a process and he couldn't fix it right now and the guy cut him off and said I don't care, get it done. Well, he sat there for a second quiet. And took off his badge, slapped it on the table, yelled "fuck you," then started walking towards the front door with middle fingers up pointing at everyone, then said "and fuck this place," and walked out. When I went home and on Steam I saw he bought GTA 5, he then had 200 hours played in 2 weeks after that, haven't checked since. Little bit late, but at Air Force basic training when you first show up you're either in civilian clothes or the uniform with sneakers, because they don't want to fuck up your feet I guess, and are affectionately called sneaker weakers. While at chow if the table behind you gets up, you need to get up and leave regardless if you're finished. If 2 tables behind you get up you'll be swarmed by MTIs and have them scream in your face until you do get up. I had just put my tray back and started to walk out when I look back and see one lone sneaker weaker by himself in a row of 5 or 6 tables, surrounded by 6 MTIs. Kid is staring straight ahead and just eating his food 1 spoonful at a time while the MTIs scream in his face. Finishes his food, sets his spoon down, picks up his drink and just slowly finishes his water, turns his glass over, puts it down, picks up his tray and walks up to put it away while still being screamed at by 6 MTIs. Kid is walking out and I realize everyone in the room is staring at him. He has no emotion, no fear, no smirk, nothing as he walks out of the chow hall. I was at a restaurant recently. While I was waiting for my friends to arrive I noticed a couple a few tables away. The lady was going on and on, I couldn't hear the exact words. But it was pretty obvious that they were having a heated argument where she was apparently scolding her so. And the guy was just sitting there having an occasional spoonful of his dessert. Exactly 3 minutes in he just stands up and walks away. He goes out of the restaurant, gets in his car and drives away. I was sitting at a table near the window facing the street. And the woman was in absolute shock. The look on her face was priceless. I mean, I shouldn't judge their relationship without context, but the guy sure didn't give a flying fart about what happened next. I did this once, lol. My shitty ex-BF was abusive and one of his favorite things was to try to start fights with me in public by berating me. He knew I wouldn't start anything as I hated public fights. One time we were out to dinner, he had driven us, and he was berating me for who knows what. Probably the way I ate. I sat there quietly ignoring him until finally I excused myself for the restroom and then just left. Walked to a gas station nearby and ordered an Uber. One of the highlights in that relationship, and sadly it's one of few. Don't date shitty people. Thank you for listening to Reddit Extravaganza. Have a wonderful day, beautiful people.